Have you ever read a New York Times best-selling book, finished it, and then thought to yourself, you know, this really wasn't that good. In fact, I wonder how it even made it on the list. Well, this can happen in one of two ways, either organically or financially, and I'm going to explain what both of those mean, so stick around. My name is Lauren and I'm an educator turned writer who also works as a book launch account manager. So I work with authors very frequently on promoting and marketing their book to expand their platform as well as grow their business. So I'm combining whatever personal knowledge I have with whatever professional knowledge I have to give you the content you see here. Today we're going to be talking about the shocking truth of how a book becomes a New York Times bestseller. In addition to the New York Times, I'm also going to be covering how a book becomes a bestseller on both Amazon and the Wall Street Journal. So we're going to be working our way progressively up to the New York Times bestseller status because that is where things get interesting. So when it comes to Amazon, there are a few different things that determine what makes a bestseller on that particular platform. And I have a small list that I don't have memorized, so excuse me while I look down and read it off. It's determined by your book's categories and keywords, how well the top book in each category is currently selling, how many copies are sold in the first week, and whether or not you're considering the Kindle versions of books, because print versions sell much differently than Kindle versions. Overall, Amazon is pretty straightforward in that more sales equals more rankings. It's like 2 + 2 = 4. Makes sense to me. It's also helpful to know that the quicker you sell, the better your book does. So the company that I work for, whenever an author does have their official book launch day, every single one of us at the company buys the book off Amazon so that we shoot the rankings up for the authors so that they can reach that bestseller status. When you do publish a book and you put it on that platform, you assign multiple categories to the book. And out of all the categories that you assign, which this can range from about 2 to 3, maybe 4, it varies. You only need to hit number 1 in only one of those categories in order for it to be considered a bestseller. And making a bestseller on Amazon can be done the easy way or the hard way. And I'm going to be explaining both. The easy way is to pick categories that are as niche as possible. Oop, there goes my paper. This means that you want to pick specific categories with minimal competition. So for example, think about small business taxes versus entrepreneurship. Which of those do you think is going to have the most noise? If you want to do it the hard way, you just do the opposite. You go broad, meaning that you pick categories that aren't as niche and that have a lot more competition in it. Like entrepreneurship, that's a really big, broad category. In order to really make this work, you want to have 3 things working in your favor. A large platform, plenty of incentives to entice people to buy the book, and of course, getting a lot of organic reviews. And Amazon can be pretty picky when it comes to reviews. They're kind of funky. They're gonna do kind of like a background sweep and take note of any like pre-existing conversations that might have taken place over social media that might have some kind of connection to you having really good reviews. So for example, if you made a promise to someone like over Twitter or Instagram, hey, I'll do this thing for you if you leave me a really good review, or hey, will you promise to leave me a good review? Like if Amazon picks that up, like you're gonna be suspended from it. And you also have to wait around like 3 days after receiving your book to leave a review. So that's also something to consider. Next is Wall Street, and there are 2 things that you need to know about Wall Street. One of them is that they build their lists on sales figures that they get from Nielsen Bookscan, which is basically just a data provider. Secondly, and similarly to Amazon, you're going to want to sell the most books in a single category. And the major difference between Wall Street and Amazon is that Amazon updates their lists daily, whereas the Wall Street Journal updates their lists weekly. So that's also something to keep in mind. And when we're talking about selling the most books in a given category, that doesn't include big box stores like Walmart, Costco, Sam's Clubs. I'm not entirely sure why. And in order to do this effectively, you need to have multiple things working in your favor, which I'm going to read off. You need to have a high quality book. And what I mean by a high quality book is that you need to have a professional book cover, professional editing done, professional formatting done, and a professional book description put together. And typically this is done in-house with larger, more traditional presses. So like, for example, if you get a traditional book deal, that's stuff that they do like within their press. If you're someone who's hybrid or self-publishing, that can look a little bit different because now you're paying out of pocket for all of those things. So it can very easily add up to be very expensive. Whereas if you are traditional and you're working with someone and doing all that in-house, that's all free because they're basically seeing you as an investment. So their goal is that however many books you sell determines how much of the costs are going to be covered and how much profit they're going to get from that. You'll also need to sell between 4,000 and 10,000 books, which is quite a range. And if you want to play it safe, your best bet is to aim more towards 7,000 or 8,000. This does count Amazon buys. It cannot rely solely on Amazon or on Barnes & Noble or any other single retail or online entity. It has to be diversified in order for it to be fair, which makes sense. And if none of that works out for you, if you don't hit those numbers organically or with the support of any influencers that you have within your network, there is the alternative. You can buy your way in. And to do this, you need to have at least $65,000. And even then, you're only allowed a guarantee. So this means that you can be guaranteed to be put on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, and if that doesn't happen, they'll give you all your money back. Thirdly and lastly, we have the New York Times, the mothership. There are two things you need to keep in mind when we're talking about the New York Times bestseller list, and that is that it measures a small pool of sales from only a few specific places. A lot of people see this as being very selective, very unfair, not quite as comprehensive as it could be, which is very different from both Amazon and the Wall Street Journal, who require their sales to be very diversified. And the second thing, which is very interesting, is that the New York Times bestseller list is a list of curated titles where a small group of people decide what to pluck and put on that list. There's a small group of people at the head of the New York Times who basically cherry pick what books they think should be on the bestseller list. So to start, as an author, you need to have gotten a traditional publishing deal, which I sort of explained a little bit before. This means that you will need to have gotten representation from an agent who connected you with a publishing house, who connected you with their in-house team where they do publishing work, production work, marketing work, the whole works. And further, the New York Times will not recognize a traditionally published book if it doesn't come from one of the big five. And for those of you who don't know, the big five include Penguin Random House, Hachette, Macmillan, and HarperCollins. Those are the big five. And they all happen to reside in New York City. Second on the list in order to become a New York Times bestseller is that you need to get at least 10,000 pre-orders. And a pre-order is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically you putting into the queue like, hey, I want to buy that book as soon as it comes out. So for example, there's a book that came out in January of this year called The Maid. That was a book that I pre-ordered, and I think it might have actually come from Penguin Random House. I'm not entirely sure. And in fact, I think that book made the bestseller list too on New York Times, so it all makes sense. And just to offer some context, an American author sells only about 250 to 500 copies of their book in its lifetime, which is about 2.5% to 5% of what's actually needed. And that's before the book comes out. Additionally, it needs to be bought or ordered at a bookstore or online retailer that reports its sales to the New York Times. Again, these sales have to be diversified, not centralized, which is a little ironic since they choose from such a small pool. And often when it comes to these purchases, bulk buys don't count. And a bulk buy is just what it sounds like. It's buying very large quantities of one book at a single time. So this can be buying 10 copies all at once, buying 100 copies all at once, buying 500 copies all at once. So as you can imagine, in order to hit those 10,000 pre-orders, you need to have either a really strong network and or a really strong platform. And when I say platform, this generally implies social media followers, aka guaranteed customers. Or additionally, if you don't hit those things organically, you have the option to buy your way onto the list, and this number is gonna shock you. Getting onto the New York Times bestseller list will cost you at least $250,000 or $250,000. You could buy some Harry Winston necklaces with that money. And thirdly, the book needs to get valid mainstream media press. such as the New York Times or the Washington Post. And this includes any media source located in New York City or anywhere on the coast, or if it's not on the coast, it needs to be widely recognized by people in the elite media. And what's funny is that this large media coverage by all these big names doesn't necessarily guarantee that your book will sell. It actually acts more as social validation for the editors at those large New York house publishers. So with that all being said, this begs the question, why does an author want their book to become a bestseller so badly? And the easy and quick answer is status. Status equals attention, which equals social validation, aka being taken seriously, which means that you are officially deemed as a good writer. Think of it as choosing a college. Would you rather go to Harvard or a small state school like me? I mean, personally, I would choose Harvard because it's such a big name, right? And although a lot of Harvard students say how grueling and hard and difficult it is, they mostly admit that pre-graduation it is really nice having the institution at least tied to their name, because it offers a lot of leverage for whatever future endeavors they do. So then, what is the purpose of a book if it's not going to become a bestseller? What can a book offer me if I can't have status? Well, there are 3 things that I came up with that might help answer this question. One of the answers is something that I'm very familiar with because it is the business that I'm in, which is helping to promote your business. And as a book launcher myself, I work with authors all the time who in fact write books to drive attention and credibility to the business that they're trying to scale. It's also necessary if you are a first-time writer, if you have absolutely no big titles to your name. This is the way to kind of put you on the grid, on the map, so that others can continue to see you more and more as an established writer. Because if you haven't written a book before and that's what you're trying to do, it's often very, very, very difficult to do. Because to a lot of traditional publishers, you are a really big risk because there are so many unknown factors because you haven't published. It at least gives you the ticket to be admitted to the writing sphere, the author sphere, the book sphere, where you can start to be taken a little more seriously and get a little more social credit. A third reason people publish books is if they have a large following. If they're considered a very popular content creator or an influencer of some kind, they can make a book that specifically caters to their following. So, it is very easy to come to the conclusion that publishing traditionally, getting on these bestseller lists, is a very, very picky and elitist sort of endeavor, which makes sense because it can be very, very selective. And a lot of moving parts have to work in your favor. And if they don't naturally, you need to have the funds in order to make it work. And this is no secret, it's public information. It's a little bit hard to find sometimes and get an accurate reporting of it, but it is out there. And in fact, I do have some sources that I use to inform this video that I'm going to link in the description box below. So if you're curious to learn more about sort of how this all works, you can definitely check that out. Otherwise, that is all I have. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Also visit my website and sign up for my weekly newsletter where I make content that is very similar to what you see on this channel. Otherwise, I want to thank you for being here and I hope you're doing well, and be sure to take care of yourself. See you next time.